10 places where Earth stops making sense. We think we understand how this planet works. Water flows downhill. Rocks stay where you put them. Lakes don't explode. Ice doesn't bleed. Rivers don't boil unless there's a volcano nearby. Fire needs fuel to keep burning. All of that sounds reasonable. It sounds like basic logic. And on most of this planet, most of the time, it's true. But there are 10 places where every one of those statements falls apart. Not in mythology, not in a movie, in documented, instrumented, peer-reviewed reality. Places that satellite data confirms and field expeditions keep coming back to, because what's happening there doesn't fit the version of Earth we carry around in our heads. Some of these places are stunning. Some are lethal. Some look like they were rendered by a computer. All of them are here, on this planet, right now. Let's go. Number 10. Death Valley, California. The rocks that move themselves. On the floor of the hottest place in North America, rocks move on their own. They leave trails, long, clean furrows cut into the dry lake bed, stretching for hundreds of feet. Sometimes the tracks run straight, sometimes they curve. Sometimes a rock appears to have been going in one direction, then made a sharp turn, as if it changed its mind mid-journey. The rocks themselves range from pebble-sized up to hundreds of pounds. Nobody pushes them, nobody drags them, they just go. The racetrack playa in Death Valley is a dried lake bed, flat, cracked into geometric polygons by the sun, sitting in a basin where summer air temperatures regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists spent the better part of a century trying to figure out what was moving these things. Cameras were set up, GPS trackers were attached, and the rocks, as if aware of the audience, would sit completely still for months, then move exactly when no one was watching. Paranormal enthusiasts had a field day. Science was quiet. Then, in 2014, a team from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography finally caught it happening in real time. The answer involved 3 completely ordinary things in a very specific, very rare combination. In winter, on the rare nights when temperatures drop below freezing, a paper-thin layer of ice, sometimes less than a millimeter thick, forms on the wet surface of the playa. As morning comes and the ice starts to melt, wind pushes the floating sheets across the wet mud. The ice acts like a sail. The rocks, resting on the near frictionless surface, get pushed along with it, a few centimeters per minute. Slow enough to be invisible in real time. Fast enough to leave a 100-foot track in a single season. 3 ordinary things. 1 extraordinary combination. And a mystery that looked supernatural for nearly 100 years. Number 9. Maracaibo, Venezuela. The place where lightning never stops. In the northwest corner of Venezuela, where the Catatumbo River empties into Lake Maracaibo, there is a place where lightning strikes up to 280 times per hour, for up to 10 hours per night, for up to 300 nights per year. NASA confirmed it. This is the single highest concentration of lightning per square kilometer on Earth. The world record for storm activity, held by a spot most people have never heard of. From a distance, the light show is silent, continuous flashes illuminating clouds from within, turning the horizon into a pulsing wall of white and blue. Sailors have used this glow as a navigational beacon for centuries. It's visible from 250 miles out at sea. They called it the Maracaibo Lighthouse long before any scientist tried to explain it. One story holds that in 1595, the light from the Catatumbo flashes silhouetted the ships of Francis Drake attempting a night raid on the coast, and local militia saw them coming. The explanation is geography. Warm, humid air rises off Lake Maracaibo and the Caribbean. The Andes surround the basin on 3 sides, creating a natural funnel where air masses collide. Cold mountain air meets warm, moist air, and the resulting convection is relentless. Thunderstorms don't form here as events, they form as a permanent atmospheric condition. The storm isn't arriving, the storm lives here. Number 8. Lake Natron, Tanzania. the lake that mummifies what it kills. Wildlife photographer Nick Brandt found them in 2011. Birds along the shoreline, rigid and pale, posed like statues. Wings outstretched, claws fixed. Every feather preserved under a thin mineral crust. He arranged some of them upright for photographs, and the images went around the world under headlines about a lake that turns animals to stone. The reality is stranger and more interesting than the headline. Lake Natron sits in Tanzania's Rift Valley at the foot of Oldonyo Lengai, the only volcano on Earth that erupts carbonatite lava, essentially molten soda ash. Volcanic minerals have been washing into the lake for millennia, turning it into an alkaline reservoir with a pH that can reach 12, roughly the same as household bleach. The water can strip the ink from cardboard within seconds. But the lake doesn't turn animals to stone. It preserves them. The alkaline environment suppresses decomposition, draws out moisture, and coats remains in sodium carbonate, the same natron that ancient Egyptian priests used to mummify pharaohs. Here, nature performs the mummification without ceremony. The birds die by flying into the lake's mirror-flat surface. The concentrated brine reflects the sky so perfectly that birds mistake water for air. Brandt found dozens of finches dead along a 50-yard stretch of shore, entire flocks hitting the surface at once. And here's the paradox that makes natron genuinely strange. This exact same lake is the primary breeding ground for 2.5 million lesser flamingos, roughly 75% of the world's entire population. Flamingos survive because of tough, scaly skin on their legs that resists the caustic water, and they feed on spirulina, the cyanobacteria that turns the lake vivid red. The alkaline water keeps predators away from nesting sites better than any fence. No jackal or hyena can cross miles of superheated brine to reach the islands. The place that kills in bulk is also the place that sustains the species. Same water, same chemistry. Number 7. Taylor Glacier, Antarctica, the bleeding ice. From a crack in the face of Taylor Glacier in Antarctica's dry valleys, one of the most lifeless environments on Earth, flows a stream of deep red liquid. Not pinkish, not rust-colored, dark arterial red. It runs down the white ice wall and spreads across the rocks below. The first researchers who reached this site in 1911 assumed it was algae. Reasonable guess. Wrong. Beneath Taylor Glacier is a sealed, ancient brine lake, cut off from the outside world for approximately 2 million years. To put that in perspective, the entire history of the human species fits inside that time frame. While all of that was happening on the surface, the emergence of Homo sapiens, every human civilization ever built, water was sitting below this glacier in total darkness, saturated with dissolved iron. In the absence of oxygen, ferrous iron stays dissolved and invisible. When that water finds a crack and seeps to the surface, it hits the air and oxidizes instantly. It rusts, and it turns that rich, unmistakable red. Inside that sealed lake, living bacteria. 2 million years without light, without oxygen, at temperatures below freezing, under hundreds of feet of ice. They metabolize iron and sulfur, running an entire microscopic ecosystem on chemical reactions with minerals alone. For astrobiologists, this is one of the most important places on Earth, not for what it is, but for what it implies. If life sustains itself under these conditions, it can sustain itself beneath the ice shells of Europa and Enceladus. The ice doesn't bleed, but it does show us what 2 million years of isolated life looks like when it finally finds a way out. Number 6. The Amazon Basin, Peru, the boiling river. Deep in the Peruvian Amazon, several hours from the nearest town, a river runs at near boiling temperatures. The water at the center of the channel reaches 200 degrees Fahrenheit. In certain stretches, it exceeds 205 degrees Fahrenheit. Over 4 miles of its length, the river is hot enough to cook anything that falls in. The local Ashaninka people call it Shanai Timpishka, boiled with the heat of the sun, and treat it as sacred territory. The nearest active volcano is 430 miles away. That's the detail that made this river scientifically uncomfortable for a long time. Geothermal features that produce water this hot are almost always located near volcanic activity. A boiling river in the middle of an Amazon rainforest, hundreds of miles from any volcano, technically shouldn't exist. When Peruvian geoscientist Andrés Russo, who first heard about the river as a childhood story from his grandfather, brought it up to colleagues in grad school, he was told flatly that it couldn't be real. He organized an expedition, found the river, and came back with thermometers and GPS coordinates. The current hypothesis: rainwater seeps down through a large fault in the Earth's crust, gets heated by hot rock deep in the subsurface, and returns to the surface here. But that explanation is still incomplete. It doesn't fully account for why this specific location, why this temperature, why this far from any volcanic system. The science acknowledges the gap. The river boils regardless. Number 5. Lake Kivu, Rwanda, DRC. The quiet catastrophe. A beautiful lake. Fishing boats on the water at sunrise. 2 million people living along the shore. The city of Goma at the northern end. Children swimming near the banks. Sunsets that could be on a postcard. 300 cubic kilometers of dissolved carbon dioxide and 60 cubic kilometers of dissolved methane sitting in the deep water. Lake Kivu sits on the border of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, nearly 1,600 feet deep, with water layers that don't mix, locked in place by dissolved salts from underwater volcanic springs that make the deep water too dense to rise. Chemical boundaries called chemoclines act as a lid. Volcanic sources continuously pump CO2 in from below. Microorganisms produce methane. Both gases stay dissolved under the pressure of the water column above, sealed in, invisible, like carbonation in a bottle that hasn't been opened yet. If the system destabilizes, from an earthquake, from the neighboring Nyiragongo volcano, which sent lava through the streets of Goma in 2002 and erupted again in 2021, from an underwater landslide, the deep water starts rising. Pressure drops. Gas comes out of solution. Bubbles make the water lighter. It rises faster. More gas is released. The process accelerates itself until it runs out of gas to release. This is called a limnic eruption, and it is not theoretical. In 1986, tiny Lake Nyos in Cameroon released about 1 cubic kilometer of CO2 in a single event. The gas, heavier than air, rolled down the hillsides and through the valleys as an invisible cloud. Over 1,700 people died in their sleep, without wounds, without warning. Survivors were those who happened to be sleeping a few meters higher on the slope, just above the edge of the cloud. They woke up and found everyone around them dead. Lake Kivu is 1,700 times larger than Nyos. An engineer working on Kivu's degassing project described a potential release event in a statement published in the journal Nature as potentially one of the worst, if not the worst, humanitarian disaster in history. The lake doesn't look like any of that. It looks like a postcard. That's what makes it first on this list. Number 4. Lake Vostok, Antarctica, the world under the ice. 4 kilometers beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, in complete darkness, under pressure that prevents the water from freezing, there is a lake the size of Lake Ontario. No one has ever seen it with their eyes. It was discovered through seismic data and radar. Lake Vostok is the largest known subglacial lake on Earth, about 160 miles long, up to 30 miles wide, nearly 2,600 feet deep. The water inside has not been in contact with Earth's atmosphere for an estimated 15 to 25 million years. The last time Vostok was open to the sky, Antarctica still had tropical forests, and the continent's fauna included marsupials. The water is liquid, which seems impossible at 3 degrees below zero, but the weight of 4 kilometers of ice creates enough pressure to suppress crystallization. Geothermal heat from below keeps the bottom from freezing. In 2012, Russian scientists drilled through the ice to reach the lake's surface. The drilling had taken decades, interrupted by technical problems, contamination debates, and international pressure. The samples that came up contained DNA sequences belonging to bacteria that matched no known phylum. Unclassified life. Organisms that, if the findings hold up, evolved in complete isolation for millions of years. A separate group in 2013 reported over 3,700 unique genetic sequences in the ice cores, including traces of fungi, crustaceans, and what appeared to be fish. Skeptics argue contamination. The debate continues. The idea itself, a lake the size of Ontario, existing in darkness under 4 kilometers of ice with a potentially isolated ecosystem, is a reminder that we haven't finished mapping this planet. Not even close. Number 3. The Danakil Depression, Ethiopia, the alien surface. There are places on Earth that look computer-generated. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia is one of them. Acid pools with a pH near 0, lower than battery acid. Hydrothermal fields running at over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Colors that don't exist in normal geology. Neon yellow, acidic green, rust orange, all at once, in patterns that look like a malfunctioning color filter. Chlorine and sulfur in the air thick enough to kill birds that land near the water's edge. Daily temperatures that can hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit. At 400 feet below sea level, in the zone where 3 tectonic plates are slowly pulling apart. The field at Dalal is not a standard volcano. It's a salt dome where superheated mineral solutions, sulfur, iron, copper, manganese, push through to the surface and precipitate in different colors as they contact the air. The result is a landscape that periodically forces editors at major publications to add notes to photos clarifying that the image has not been processed. In 2019, one research group claimed to have found living microorganisms in Dalal's most extreme pools, where pH approaches 0 and temperatures approach boiling. A second group, with stricter contamination protocols, challenged the finding. What looked like cells under the microscope were mineral biomorphs, abiotic structures that mimic the appearance of life. The argument is still open. Danakil is where science is actively testing the outer boundary of where life is possible and where impossible begins. Number 2. Darvaza, Turkmenistan, the fire that won't go out. In the middle of the Karakum Desert in Turkmenistan, there was a crater about 230 feet across that has been on fire for over 50 years. The most commonly told origin story: in 1971, Soviet geologists drilling for natural gas hit an underground cavern. The ground collapsed, and someone decided to ignite the escaping methane to prevent it from accumulating and endangering nearby settlements. It was expected to burn out in a few weeks. 50 years later, it is still burning. Details of that origin story are disputed. The exact date, the circumstances, who made the call. The Turkmen government ordered it extinguished twice in the 2010s. Both attempts failed. What is not disputed is the geology. The Karakum sits above some of the world's largest natural gas deposits. Methane seeps through fissures in the rock, and it will continue doing so long after anyone reading this is gone. Darvaza isn't even the only perpetual flame on Earth. Yanar Dag, Burning Mountain, on the Absheron Peninsula in Azerbaijan has been burning for centuries. Marco Polo described it. Zoroastrian fire temples were built on gas seeps like this one for thousands of years. But Darvaza is the most dramatic, most visible, and most disorienting. A hole in the desert floor, glowing orange at night, radiating heat you can feel from 100 feet away, with no apparent source and no intention of stopping. The earth burns. Some of it has been burning longer than any country on the map has existed. Number 1. Lake Kivu, again, because nothing on this list hits harder. No sulfuric colors, no lava, no fire, no red water, no steam, no smell. Just a lake, beautiful, calm, ordinary. 2 million people around its shores, a volcano next door that has erupted within living memory and is being actively monitored. Earthquake activity that registers as background noise, not news. A sediment record at the lake bottom showing catastrophic degassing events occurring roughly every 1,000 years. And 300 cubic kilometers of dissolved gas, held in place by the density difference between layers of salt water, just waiting for the chemistry to shift. None of the other places on this list are hiding from us. The racetrack playa makes the rocks move. Catatumbo lights up the sky. Darvaza glows from miles away. They show you what they are. Kivu doesn't. Kivu looks exactly like what you'd want a lake to look like. The fishermen go out every morning. The kids play near the water. The sun comes up over the hills and turns the surface gold. Everything is ordinary. Everything is calm. And that's the most unsettling thing on this entire list. Every one of these 10 places follows the laws of physics. Rocks move because of ice and wind. Ice bleeds because of iron oxidation. A lake stores gas because of density stratification. A river boils because of geothermal heating. A crater burns because of methane. None of it requires a supernatural explanation. All of it is explainable. What isn't explainable is the expectation that this planet was supposed to be simple. We grew up with a version of Earth that was manageable. Water flows, rocks sit, things behave. These 10 places are what the planet looks like when you stop assuming it was designed for your convenience and start looking at it as a system that runs on its own rules. Some of those rules produce lightning 300 nights a year. Some produce a boiling river in a rainforest. Some produce invisible chemistry sitting under a fishing village, waiting for one wrong push. The planet isn't broken. It's just more complicated than the version we were sold. That's not a reason for fear. It's a reason for attention. The investigation continues. Subscribe.